So, welcome to our day five of our live session. I wanted to start off first with gratitude. I just feel so much appreciation that you guys have not only been watching the videos, but you have also been painting with me. I think that's the most important thing because what you want to do is you want to connect the skills with what you can do. And I think one of the biggest sins that I'm guilty of is binge watching YouTube videos without painting. And if you do that, I want you to raise your hand. I want you to tell me, yes, I do that too. So, or put it in the chat like, yes, I do that too. I'm guilty of that. It's very easy for us to think like, oh, if I'm watching it counts, right? And honestly, well, it trains your brain, but what happens is that we are just filling the left side of our brain, the logical side. So you're giving it so much information, so much knowledge, and then your right side of the brain is the body, the intuition, the expressiveness does not really connect. So you want to marry both of them together, right? And I think this is where it's so important to translate it. And I think this is where like I've been running in the beginning of my watercolor journey when I was learning to teach. I'm also finding my watercolor teaching voice, right? And obviously I would go on YouTube and I would see how other people are teaching. And when I did that, I came upon so many different teaching styles, but one of the biggest things that I saw in everyone's teaching style that was very common or the same was that a lot of teachers were just demonstrating what they were doing. And I think that was the frustrating part for me because when I was posting on Instagram, people were going like, "Oh, Jillian, you paint such beautiful florals. You have to teach." And the first thing I told them was, "I'm sorry, I can't teach. I just don't have the words for it. I know how to do the thing, but when you ask me like how I got it, it's almost like I can cook and I can put in all the things and show you, but then I don't really know how to tell you how much salt or how much sugar or how much things. Because like I've been using intuition. And interestingly enough, this is actually how Asian cooking is like, which is quite funny. Because like when I ask my mom about her recipes, she's always like, "Oh yeah, so you put a dash of this and you put a little bit of that." And it's always like, okay, I try it and it's always never the same. But here is where it was the same struggle that I had when I was learning. So then when I transitioned on to teaching, I thought like, oh, okay, maybe that's what people like. Maybe people just wanna, I don't know, paint more different florals. So then I went on my way to try and find my teaching voice. My first couple of YouTube videos were showing you how to paint, like an anemone, a tulip, whatever, right? And my first watercolor challenge was the same way. But this is where I then noticed that there was a disconnect between what people were able to do. So people could follow the steps, but then they could not make it their own. It's the expression part that was missing. And this is why whenever I shape or think about my retreats, I want it to be one where it resonates not only with where you are, but also whatever supplies you have. You will notice that I will never mention you need to use this brush or this is the best brush. I would never mention that. And I never mention what paints I use unless people ask me. And it's nothing to do with that, like I don't support specific brands or anything like that. But I feel like this is really built deeply on trust. Because, if I were to recommend something and it does not work out, and if an artist is looking for something to blame, it would be the paint or the brush or the Jillian, right? And I never want that to be because I feel like the brands that you choose and the colors and all of this is very personal. It's the same with choosing clothes for fashion. You can't really, I can't recommend to you like this is the best dress, like everyone's got to get this dress because everyone's got a different body type. And it's kind of the same as painting. We all have a different way of holding and moving with our brush. And that's why on day one, I really wanted to focus on that experience where we all sing the same song in terms of understanding that brushwork is not about just repeatedly doing the same marks, but also building your awareness to how you hold your brush. Like what I said, your brush is made up of a handle that is this long. I don't know why people just hold this tight. There is so many different parts to explore, right? And not only that, the different angles. And then you can push away or you can pull towards you. So there is so much things that we can do. Now, I am just curious to know next, um, is how have you found this retreat so far? If you can describe it in one word, just put it down in the chat. Like, what would that one word be? It could be anything. I mean, it could be a fruit also if you're hungry. I don't know. Just write down that word. And, I'm still seeing people rolling in. It's really fun to see the faces to the paintings that I've been seeing on the Facebook group. And, also the questions and so on and so forth. So that's one. And another thing is also, I know I'm so fast with the questions. I just asked you for one word, and my next question is, I want to know what stages are you guys at? Tell me what stage you're at. We've got stage 1 all the way to 5 because, as you know, Jillian's going to repeat the same song because people might not have attended the first live session. And, if you missed it, if you watched the replay, if you haven't watched the replay, dude, it's 2 hours long. And I've actually put the timestamp where you can actually skip. So, if you're a skipper, you can definitely skip. But the important part is more than just the painting. So we've got people in stage 3, stage 2, 2, 3, 3, 4, 3, 4. Oh my gosh, so fun. And I see a lot of 2, 3s, which is like the transition stage. So this is the fun stage, the in-between stage, because 2, 3 is kind of like all of the skills, like the wet and dry and the wet and wet. And then when you get onto stage 3, you're kind of like trying to put layers to your work. And today's live session is super fun because what we're going to be doing is if you have been painting with me and if you have been, creating one flower at a time, we are going to be using the flowers that you have painted as your reference. And we're going to be creating composition. So we're going to be putting it down into different parts of the paper, and we're going to go and create layouts. Okay, so that's what we're going to be doing today. And I'm going to show you how each stage builds on each other as you are building out this composition. Yeah. So I love that Nicole is acknowledging this thing around head knowledge 4-5 and head knowledge 2-4, depending on what skill. And what I love about this is it's really that right brain, left brain thing that I was telling you about earlier, where we are trying to connect the dots. And so many of the time it's true, right? You might have read lots of cookbooks, but when it comes to the actual cooking, it's different. So that's where we are at. So this retreat experience basically has been mapped out in a way where my focus is very much on helping you to apply the skills, which is exactly what we did with day 1. And this is also the same experience I bring my members through within Brush Movement Collective, the same container where I encourage them to build skills first. And this is where I had created the 60-day skill builder for them. And, our founding members who are here in today's session would know the conflicting feelings that I had in the very beginning of brush movement, where I did not have any of my workshops. Okay, so like basically I was just giving just monthly floral classes. But one of the things that kept standing out for me every time I gave the monthly floral classes was during the Q&A sessions, the questions that came out were much deeper. They were not about like, Jillian, how do I paint a rose? Jillian, how do I paint a tulip? They were about, Jillian, why are my marks disconnected? Or why is it that I can't paint leaves that look like this? Why do my flowers look flat? And that's why I realized that the questions were very skill based. And this is where I wanted to help the left hand side of the brain to build the skills and help to develop the clarity before we actually apply it in our monthly floral classes. And this is the same experience that you are getting in the retreat, where on day one, we focused on the skill. And then each day, the small little flowers that you're getting is to help you to apply it. And of course, depending on what stage you are in, maybe the stage two and threes are going to be a lot stronger or better with layering in comparison to someone who is brand new and beginning. And I can see it because of the areas around water control and things like that. And while I can see it, I also try not to mention it in the Facebook group because I feel like it is so easy for us to go into gap mentality where we feel like we have gaps in our learning. And what I don't want us to have, because we are our worst critics, we are already trying to laser focus and identify all the gaps. I want us to focus on what we are strong in and are able to do, which is why the artist passage also celebrates milestones, what you can do instead of what you can't. And that said, I just want to point out that in the Facebook group, this is something that I just was so excited by. Okay. I get really excited by questions like these because it always makes me see that these are things that often hinder the way we feel about ourselves. And, there was a participant in the group who asked that whether they feel like there's too much in their own head to paint, and that's where I am today, and I can't relax. And I think one of the things that I loved was that there were 18 comments from different artists, different people sharing their experiences. And for me, that was like the soul of the community. It's just like we just got to know each other on this platform in Paint and Petal just a couple of days back, right? And then suddenly people are offering the same kind of perspective and sharing ways that has helped them. Now, I want to share with you what I wrote about this because I feel like so many of the time I have mentioned this to my Brush Movement Collective members where I struggle to show up creatively because this is a full-time job. I do this day in and day out, and it's almost like people don't expect psychologists to be angry. I remember there was one time I was so angry about something, and someone gave me this comment: "You're a psychologist. I'm supposed to be like calm." I was like, "Yeah, but I'm human," you know? And it's the same with painting. Doesn't mean that you're a painter, that we're meant to be able to paint every single thing or feel creative all the time, right? We also have our moods. And this is where I want you guys to put down in the chat how you feel about this, right? Do you feel creative every single day? I want you to put yes, no, whichever, put it down in the chat so that way, it also helps us to see that this is normal to feel days where you don't want to show up. And I think that it's not so much on trying to change that feeling. Instead, what I've learned is to sit with the feeling and to allow ourselves to go, yes, today I don't feel creative. Yes, there is a retreat that is ongoing and it's only limited till this date. And I feel this sense of urgency to finish it all. Yes, there is that ongoing pressure. But what if I told you that it's just showing up? It's just there's the person who comes in and watches all the videos versus the person who comes in, watches one video and actually paints is going to gain so much more than that person who watched all the videos, right? And I always feel it's been helpful to actually write it down and put it on the side because it's almost like a physical way of representing that feeling and then setting it aside to allow yourself to then let that feeling be somewhere else instead of allowing it to stay inside. Because when we allow it to continue to fester, we're going to feel bad about ourselves. Then we're going to avoid the painting. And when we avoid the painting, then tomorrow we're going to feel worse. And it becomes this cycle, right? And sometimes I've always felt like doing just 5 minutes of messy marks could be that cure. And that's why on day one, I got you to start with just making 3 marks. And that's what I'm going to invite you to do today as well. We're going to start with that too. Now, here's the thing. I just want us to remember that we have days, we are human, and to also always approach the things that come into our minds and our hands with kindness, because that way it's going to be a lot easier for us to, continue to sustain whatever we're doing. And I'm so excited when I see the chat that someone said, I have the courage to use my precious 100% cotton paper, which is so amazing because today, who is using 100% cotton paper? Put it down in the chat because today I'm going to treat you guys to me using arch paper, my darling 100% arch 100% cotton paper. This is another thing that frustrated me when I was doing YouTube tutorials because I had no idea that all of these artists were using 100% cotton paper and I was just using bad quality paper, which also explained the biggest reason why I could never get the results, right? So yes, we've got Kathy who is using 100% cotton paper, Eileen too, Tanya, very nice. Okay, I'm very excited to see all you guys. Me too, Aishwara, Warya. Yes, okay. I am just absolutely excited to see all you guys using your 100% cotton paper. So now let's get our arms ready. Now that we've gotten our minds slightly warmed up, Hillary is using 100% cotton, and Ikra not 100% cotton, but 300 GSM. So very nice and thick to hold all of that water. So let's get painting. So I just want to share an announcement. And the reason why I'm sharing this announcement is because I know that lots of us are going to have different things that they need to do midway, and I have no idea how long I'm going to take to paint. You will notice that my workshops are the length they are because I like to take my time, and I also take time with questions. So this is also a good opportunity for you to ask questions in the chat if you have from the experience. But I want to share with you that on Tuesday, we have another workshop. And this workshop is a ticketed event where it is just $10 for the first 50, and we're close to 50 now, participants on how to translate your brushwork into a composition. Now, what we're going to be covering are the three different ways in which we are painting loose florals in composition. We are going to talk about layouts, we're going to talk about color, and we're also going to talk about the different watercolor effects. So these are the three different ways we're going to be covering. It's almost a taster to our big program that is underway. It's in the works called the Art of Composition that is inside Brush Movement Collective. So this is actually a good taster for that. Now, another thing I want to share with you is that your ticket for this workshop, if you were to decide to join Brush Movement Collective, which is going to open for enrollment on Wednesday. So we're not opening yet because I want to give you time to digest and sit with the different things and practice first so that you see whether or not you think that this is going to be a good space for you and your practice. You can use the $10 to offset your membership. So this means that you will not have to, pay $10 and then pay for the membership. So that $10 is going to be used to offset, and I'll give the people who have attended the workshop a code for it so that then you'll be able to add it into your application. So I am going to get started, and this is where the fun stuff is going to happen. Let's go in there. Let's see. I'm gonna just stop share and we are going to get into the painting. So before that, let's do a couple of brush warm-up exercises. I want you guys to just put down in the chat whether you're going to be painting along. And yes, Tuesday session is free for members of Brush Movement Collective. Brush Movement Collective gets all the free perks. I mean, you get free for all of the existing and future workshops that I do. So Yes, it is going to be free, so you can just come as you are. And I have got this. So yes, I've got a lot of people painting along. So we've got Terry painting along, Julie, Hillary, Eileen, Suing, Krista. Very nice. So this was what we had covered before in the live session on day one. And I am going to be, and then, we put it together with into different florals. And what I want us to do is I want us to just take like, I don't know, a minute to just make some messy marks on your page, right? And this is just for you to select the brush that you want to use and to create some of those messy marks. The messy marks that you are making does not have to be um, does not have to be meaningful. That means it does not have to reflect a specific flower or leaf or anything like that. Just go with whatever color that you're feeling for. Use the opportunity to just be exploring and playing, try different directions, and just be moving your arm around. Okay, I think the most important is that we want to try and loosen up that muscle. Loosen up the grip on your brush as well, because that's not going to be helpful if we are going to be painting loosely. Now, I actually put a poll on Facebook asking you guys, if you dance when you paint. I'm sure it was a really odd question. Um, and, and of course, majority of people said no, nobody dances when they paint. And then somebody wrote a comment to say, oh, I I did think about standing when I paint. And here is where, if you have the capacity to, I actually encourage you to try making marks right now, standing. Because the difference is that when you are standing, you are leaning a lot less on your brush. You are definitely moving a little bit different. And you are also able to have a wider perspective of the paper and also the brush. So then you can kind of get fun with things, right? And, apart from making marks while you are exploring all of this, try and play with the amount of water you have on your brush too. Maybe you want to have a lot of water, maybe you just want to have a little. And Nicole is painting and singing karaoke. So fun. And I want to just invite you to also remember how I talked about the stroke that I encourage a lot of my members to practice, and that is the thin stroke. And the reason was to ensure that you learn how to go lighter on your brush. Because it's really easy to do the full pressure strokes. Full pressure strokes is just full bodied and pressing it down and dragging and moving, right? But then when it comes to the thin strokes, they are a little bit harder. Friends, this warm up exercise is helping me as much as it's helping you. And I get nervous whenever I do the live sessions. I know I maybe you feel like it doesn't appear so, but like my heart is pounding like crazy and my hands get really tense. So this is helpful for me because when we paint the first flower, the dreaded first flower, the scariest, the first mark that we create on our paper, there is a higher propensity to overwork because we are overthinking, and we're also at a stage where we're holding our brush a lot tighter than we want. Okay. Now, I want you to tell me after we've done this, we've just done this for like maybe a minute or two. Tell me, how did this feel for you? If you could rate the tension in your hand from 0 to 5, what would it be? 0 being no tension, and 5 being the most amount of tension. So I want you to rate that. And while you are rating that, we are going to move on to our beloved paper, where we are going to start with our mark making. So we've got some numbers coming in. And don't worry, sometimes the warm up might not help you to ease up either. I know it's counterintuitive. We hope that it would, but there is always a possibility that you still feel tense. Maybe you need a little bit more time. That could be another factor for us to think about. Okay, now these were our flowers that we've painted. And an artist has pointed out, Jillian, where did this one go? How come this guy is missing? And this was done in last year's Paint and Petal. I'm actually curious to know who has attended last year's Paint and Petal retreat before. I want you to put yes in the chat. Um, because what the reason why I did not add this guy in is because this year, instead of 3 days, I decided to make it 5 days. I wanted to really slow down and scale down the amount of overload that you get in a 3 day period. As a result, I decided to group the flowers based on difficulty, starting with the snowdrops, which was going to be, just focusing on simple shapes. And then I wanted to do these two, which were front-facing flowers. And it was actually honestly a choice between this one or this, but I chose these two instead. And the reason was because I liked how this one was a good brush shape for you to focus on. And also, the next grouping was these two. So you would notice that the flowers were very similar in shapes and they are done intentionally that way. And then the poppies are just my favorite. And then the marigold, right? And this was all based on the each of the stages as well. So you would see inside the website for each of the flower, it would actually reflect that this was a stage 1 flower, and then you've got like stage 2, 3 flowers, stage 3 flowers, and so on. And the stages reflects not only the simplicity of the shapes, but also the techniques and the skills that are included to help you to get to those flowers. So the more layering there is, the higher the stage it gets. And this is also based on the complexity of the flower. So the marigold here is one of those flowers where it is multi-petal, it's a high chance of being a blob, the overworking chances are high, and you would see that I've tagged it as a stage 4 and 5, and that's also done intentionally. Well, of course, you are welcome to add in an anemone on your own, or whatever other flowers and fillers, because that's actually my assignment to you, which I would invite you to do in the next 2 days while we are taking time to digest the skills that we are learning. And here is where I will be talking about the assignment, where I want you to add in fillers. Like these are all filler flowers that I had added to the composition that you actually don't see. And I wanted you to take the opportunity to just exercise your own creativity, use brushwork to actually, make very simple marks and so on and so forth. So we're going to use this as our reference. And, if you have not painted these, then I will just be shouting out, I will mention to you what flower I'm painting at the moment so that maybe you could go and grab the reference where we have in our portal. So let me just go inside the portal, grab that reference, just in case some of you guys prefer to paint from a reference photo. I'm also curious to know, friends, in this retreat, how many of you felt like it was the first time you were painting from a reference? Put it down in the chat. First time, just first time or not first time. So then it simplifies the responses. Lots of first times. I see first time, first time, first time, not first time. Good. Move my hand to the very back of the brush. Never done that before. Awesome. First time. All right. So lots of first timers painting from a reference. And for me, I felt like that was one of those things that really changed the way I painted. I did a 100-day project where I weaned off following YouTube so that I could just focus on painting what I saw with the references. And I think that was what helped me to connect the dots with understanding how to explain or see how watercolor worked because I was really slowing down and observing. So Tanya said, not the first time, but first time I've paid proper attention. So this is amazing stuff. So we are going to start by painting our composition. And here is where I want to just select a flower that is front facing and that we are going to have, which is our hellebore flowers. One of the things that I love about those flowers is that, the petals are kind of like uniform, they are pretty, and I am going to wet my brush. And while I'm doing this, I want you to pay attention to how much water I have, because that is really the next stage. The first stage right now in stage one is that we are building up the layers in our brush. And while I'm painting the hellebore flowers, you can take advantage of while it's still wet and you can just charge in some color. And I want to invite you to really take your time to make the strokes. Then allow the watercolor to do the work. Let the things bleed. Remember, we're doing those moon-shaped marks. Then we are gonna move into another moon-shaped mark here, maybe. And this time, I'm gonna intentionally leave out a petal there. So this here is stage one, where we are just learning about the pressure of our brush. We're building up the flowers, and this is all still stage one. Okay, now I invite you to change up the color. Of course, you can paint another hellebore somewhere else, maybe a side-facing one, because we did a side-facing one, right, in our reference. And notice how when I'm doing the different strokes, I am not going over that same area over and over again. But this is really where, because right now, the stage that I'm at in my journey, I am currently transiting from stage 4 to 5. And my ability to use movement with the brush is more than someone who is in stage 1. So if you feel like, oh my gosh, Jillian, you're just doing this so effortlessly and I will never paint like you, my response is, what is your stage? Think about what stage you are at and where you are, because that's very important. Because that way it will ground you a little bit more and it will also prevent you from comparing where you are with where I am, right? So I want you to focus on where you are. So notice how I'm leaving pockets of white, which is what we did with the side-facing one that we had in our reference. So, if you go back into our hellebore, we had one of those side-facing ones. And then we have a little bud that's hanging out at the side. So what I'm going to do is, since I'm in the mood for all of these brushy marks, let's create a crocus. And for this crocus, we can paint it in fun colors or directions. In fact, I'm just thinking of pairing it right here and noticing how when I am pulling with my brush, I'm also tapering it out. I'm using I'm taking advantage of my paper. I'm looking at like, okay, it's still wet. Let's add in some nice blends there. Okay. I am just thinking about where am I going to reflect a petal? I don't have to paint every single petal. My job is to just showcase some areas that could be petals. Could even do one that's kind of coming down the side. And notice how, again, I'm just moving with my brush. There are a few ways of moving. You can move slowly with it, or you can pick up the pace and go a little bit faster. And then you can think about where you can charge in paint. I'm holding the brush quite close to the front now because I'm actually using it just for the fine tip. So I kind of need a little bit of that precision. Okay. Now, right now, we are still in stage one. We're just mapping out all the different stages and the different shapes. We are not adding in layers yet, but this is also a very important stage because we are setting the stage for this painting. Now, depending on what paper you're using, what brush you're using, you might have different types of effects. The brush that I'm using right now is a mixed synthetic and natural hair brush. This means that it can hold a good amount of water and also it can retain its bounce, which is why it springs back really nicely. And with a mixed synthetic hair brush, the natural part of the brush is going to hold water a lot better, which explains why you find that sometimes my brush just goes on and it doesn't seem to dry out. Okay, now as we are arranging the different flowers and putting them together, I just want you to reflect on what direction you want your flowers to be in. Now, we can play with this as an all-over pattern. It can be everywhere. And the most important thing that I want you to pay attention to is really the way that you are holding and moving your brush. Okay? Now, let's do a poppy that is yellow because, we did poppies yesterday. Those are really fun and nice. So because you see, this is a stage 3 scale where I am just aware that the colors that I have in terms of warmth and cool, we have got a couple of warm ones here and a couple of cool ones here. We want to create a connection or a bridge between the two. So we create transition. And this is something our stage 3 and 4 artists work on with our scale builder, where we help them to do the art of color. It's a crazy one, 40 modules. Never expected that. Oh my gosh. Took me half a year to finish. Too long. Too long. That's my perfectionist brain there. But for that one, I think one of the things that I really enjoyed learning and doing is not just the theory, but also, seeing it being applied in my own work, and then later on, like noticing a difference in the way I paint as well. So I think that was a huge, huge thing that I was really noticing. So I'm putting my poppy here and it's front facing. I'm just swishing my brush around, did some M strokes here. I'm painting them really lightly at the moment because I'm just noticing that the values here are darker. And here is where we are talking about our stage 2 scale, where you're paying attention to the color values. Really, that's your paint and water ratio. So we're still setting the stage, but as we set the stage, you're noticing that I'm speaking about all kinds of different things. And these are all related to how we work and use our brush, right? So I'm just adding in that beautiful center with the yellow. I'm just sprinkling in some yellows here and along the edges, while it's still wet, but I'm working in air condition today. So my painting is definitely drying a lot quicker than I want. I'm gonna add in my green as well, but I'm making sure that this green has the same tinge of yellow. So we've got a nice warm green. And You can spread in a bit of that green in the poppy itself too. This here is your stage 2 scale, where we are also refining your paint and water ratio. So knowing how much paint your brush needs and knowing how much water your paint needs. And this is a different muscle memory that we build in stage 2 because I feel like different brushes work differently. For example, my mixed synthetic hairbrush is going to work different if I were to use my Princeton brush, for example. And this is where the experimentation and the play on your part becomes really, really helpful. So we've got a couple of flowers now, different sizes, super fun. And I'm just actually thinking of adding in another poppy. And I'm just going to be using like a dirty color. So this is like a muted color, and I'm trying to represent white because we did a white poppy, didn't we? We did a white poppy, and I'm just going to be adding her somewhere here. And one of the ways that I like to make white is where the center of my palette, all the different colors gather. So you can see my palette here. This is the same palette that we use for the art of color with all the different 12 colors. And right in the center where all the colors come together, exactly in color theory, you would hear that your colors mix and mute with each other, right? And I am just gonna throw in my poppy here. And friends, while you're painting this first layer with me and you're tuning into how you're moving with your brush and whether you're noticing that, oh my gosh, Jillian's going so fast or Jillian's going incredibly slow. Come on, girl, pick up the pace. I just want to remind you that this is all about the experience. Think about the experience that you are getting right now, whether it's attending this as a live workshop or, getting to just sit down and spend some time with your brush because you've had a crazy day or a crazy morning or your day has not started. This is the best way to start. I want you to just again reconnect with that instead of feeling like you have to be everywhere and anywhere. Okay? And I'm just putting the flowers in different places, right? They're random. They don't have a sense of, say, direction or placement as yet. Now let's do our pansy maybe. I got some color from here, and I'm just gonna make a pansy maybe around here. Okay, so I'm using my brush and kind of swishing it around. And while we're doing this, I just want to have you be mindful that as you are pushing on your brush and pulling back, sometimes you get this water bead, right? And here is where a lot of our stage 1 artists struggle with just this bead that appears the moment you lift your brush. How do you get that away? Well, this is a stage 2 skill where I want to remind you that your brush is a water control device. Just mop it up, dry your brush, mop it up, and kind of bring that in together. Okay? And I'm just gonna spread out some of that pink there, and maybe here is where I inject in that second petal, noticing that I'm just using the tip to just kind of draw it out a little. And I'm going to use that same tip and kind of draw it out here at the side too. So you've got these like small little petals kind of coming out, right, in the pansy flower. The pansies are so fun because you can have the very nice centers here, and my paper has dried and it's hard to tell because right now it still feels cool to touch. So I know that if my brush has too much water, the chances of me getting those blooms are very high. And this is something that I taught my members, our stage 2 artists in From Blobs to Blooms. And recently, because I realized that I learned so much more about our water, and that, for stage 1 and 2 artists, I wanted to teach them about the ability to control. Because, the stage 1 and 2 artists are freaking out that the water is going everywhere. And they're just seeking control at that moment. That's something that they want for their stage, right? So then, yes, I did from blobs to blooms. Um, 1.0, which focused on control. When I got to stage 3, 4, and 5 for my artist this year, just recently, actually last month that I released, I wanted artists to learn that it's not about control anymore. In fact, it's about timing, and it's about also thinking about where do you want your colors to go, right? And I think that when we start trusting and allowing the paint to do the work, the entire painting changes. So here, my paper has fully dried. So then I'm adding in some of those marks into my pansies. Now I want you to notice how I'm just going one flower at a time. And this is all still the first layer of the flowers. I am not adding in any more layers at this point. The only thing that I'm focusing on is setting the stage where we've got bleeds in certain places, like here where I've charged, or, I might have added in a couple of lines where it's still dry. And this is it. We're just setting the stage at this stage. And another thing I want to bring your attention to is how I varied the sizes of the flowers. So then it makes your composition a lot more fun because you've got some flowers that are bigger and some that are smaller. It's almost like we're mimicking a bouquet. I don't know what this bouquet is gonna look like yet, but we are just playing. And we're just doing flowers at the moment. Now, on Tuesday, I'm actually going to be talking about layouts, and I'm going to talk about movement, and I'm also going to be talking about placement. Like, how do you know what direction and what spaces to go? But because for the last 5 days, I wanted our focus to be really just on brushwork, you would see that a lot of my explanation leans towards the way we've been using our brush. So in the last couple of minutes, as I've been demonstrating, I've been speaking a lot to helping you to understand when I'm pressing my brush, how much water it is, what's the condition of my paper, because all of these things is setting the stage for our stage 3, 4, and 5 artists who are going to be adding layers and playing with color. Okay, so everyone's still doing okay, right? I see busy brushes, which is amazing. Keep those brushes busy. So let's inject in more pansies. And one of the things that I love, I don't know if you've noticed, is like, I just like adding in my flowers behind flowers. This is your small introduction to negative painting, where you are painting around the flower, right? And notice how I'm just pushing the paint around, and I'm painting another pansy here. So I'm really just putting the petals around and then also allowing the brush to just swoosh around my C shape and coming back. And lovely dry brush marks here because there was not enough water in the brush, but I love it. I love dry brush marks because I feel like they add so much more texture to your painting. And, adding in some of that contrast where you're using really thick globs of paint. Look at that. So beautiful when you have this beautiful contrast there. Don't be afraid of picking up paint, friends. Okay, watercolor does not have to be like super transparent. Like if you pick up a lot of paint, this really nice thing can be happening. So don't miss out on that. Then I'm just gonna be adding in like this little thing where I know I have the side of that poppy. Okay, and while it's still wet, my centers are still wet, just gonna add in some color, a little bit of blue maybe, just to let the thing bleed. And notice that I'm just dotting and dabbing and just letting the mess happen, right? So we've got a few different flowers here, nice and bright. You don't have to paint every single flower. We're not going to paint every single flower. So far, I know in your mind you might be going checklist, tick, yes, we've painted this, checklist, checklist. No, we're not going to checklist today. We're just going to paint based on what our brush feels. If you like, you can definitely inject in some tulips if you like, if you want. Now I'm using my brush now as a water control device and I am lifting. See, I'm trying to separate these petals, and while I'm lifting, I'm putting the color down on my paper, and I'm using one brush stroke to do that. Can you see how it has slowly kind of revealed a petal, right? And of course, the more you lift, the more it comes out. But this only works when your paper is at least damp and um, when it is not dry. Okay, once it's dry, it's going to be a bit trickier. You don't want to overdo it too. So I just did it for a few areas with one stroke. And also another thing that I want you to note is that depending on what kind of paint you have, the paint properties are so important. And that's actually something that a stage one artist don't have to worry about because you should worry more about your brushwork. But your stage three and four artists need to start thinking about the properties of your paints because that's going to influence the way you lift. Like staining paints are harder to lift than non-staining paints, but they're great for adding layers as well. So these are considerations and things for us to think about. Now let's move on, and I just want to add another poppy. I know this is like I'm just totally biased. I love poppies. Who doesn't? And I'm just gonna add another one here. Okay, and this girl is gonna be white again. So I'm painting her even lighter than before. I'm just swooshing my brush around using the sides. I'm gonna leave that last part for just adding in pinks like I had with the inside our day four, where we are just adding in that pink petals shapes coming out. And while it's still wet, you can charge in paint, make it fun. And while it's still wet, you can inject in some color as well if you like. So, it started off really white, but over time I'm giving it a glow up, adding in some of those nice little peach pink color. And instead of yellow, I've actually injected in orange. So it's up to you to play around with colors. Sometimes I like to dot and charge and dab, see how it runs around and moves. And you add your center. Maybe you can make your center extra big for this one. Letting that green kind of go a little bit wilder. So it's kind of overtaking the flower a little bit. That's okay. Right. So we've got a couple of poppies, a couple of hellebores. Are we gonna stop painting the flowers? Are we gonna add the stems now? Because this is the part where things get really super fun. Now I'm gonna be using the tip of my brush. And remember all of those glorious lines that we have been practicing. Now we're gonna be putting them to use because we're gonna swirl around everywhere. And this truly is my favorite part. We're still kind of in stage one and two where we are setting the stage. And notice how the greens that I've used, I've not really touched my convenience greens. I love I I love mixing my own greens because I feel like you get a whole variation and you will never get the same green and it gives your painting so much more interest. And we did a live session with brush movement where we pulled out the different combinations of greens. And here I'm going to add a bud because our cute poppy had a bud that was hanging out. And while it's still wet, you can charge in some fun colors, some paint. Then we're going to use the tip of our brush and add in your stems. I am just flowing and notice how we're doing our curve lines. Okay? I am curving this girl around here, maybe. Mm. Just connecting our flowers. You can feel free to add in a bit more yellow to your greens if you want it to be, fun. Maybe, let me just think, like, just added one here, and I want it to be this. Where am I? Oh, this is such a blob here. What do I do with that blob? You can actually see that blob on camera, right? So with that blob, I'm gonna just remove it and using my brush now, not as just a paint applicator, just gonna lift out that blob, soak it, and then it's gone. While it's still wet, it's a good chance for you to, injecting color. Put in some blue maybe, charge in something, make it fun while it's still wet. That's the beauty of watercolor. While it's still wet, it's all fair play. And I think if we approach that with more fun, it would be a lot less pressure on like how it should look or should turn out and be, and a lot more about like just letting yourself make marks. Gonna just pull out a couple of lines. And you can also now start adding in a few leaves if you like, right? So this is where you can choose to add in leaves that are going to be either long and thin or flat. We're still doing stage 1 and 2, friends, where we've basically used the belly and thick side of our brushes to create the florals. And then we use the thin side to create all of the stems. And this is just still that first layer. Hope that you guys are catching on. So I didn't say catching up, we're catching on. That means you are kind of understanding the stages that your paintings go through. Just like how as artists, we have different stages. I believe the same for our paintings too. Adding in a couple of leaves, noticing how I flick my brush so I created almost like a dry brush stroke kind of leaf. And you can do the same for here. Some of your leaves that are further behind, you can add in a bit of blue to it so it cools it down. When you cool down the color, you invite um, you invite in perspective. This is your stage 3 scale where you're starting to plan a little bit more how you want to position your colors, the relationship between colors. And it's going to be a lot less about how it looks, but how they go together. It's less about, is this, what pink is this? Right? It's going to be a lot less about that. Just injecting in some pink to my leaves, speaking of asking how it feels. Because why not, right? Spread it out. Okay. So now that we have kind of set the stage, created a couple of leaves and things, and my next invitation to you is we're going to be starting to think about our layers. We're going to start to kind of inject in a little bit more detail into our florals. And here is the part where I want to invite you to think about what's going on with your painting. Because not every painting needs layers. You don't have to add layers for every single thing because there are parts in your painting where maybe you want to retain some of the beautiful blends and we don't want to overlayer it. And this is really a stage 3 scale. The reason why I call it stage 3 scale is because in stage 1, we were getting to know our brush for brush work. In stage 2, we are understanding our brush for water control and as a tool. When you get to stage 3, you are able to hone both of these skills from stage 1 and 2. So that means by the time you get to 3, you're able to manipulate your brush in a way where you are confident to add layers on top of your flower. So if you feel this like, oh, I'm not sure, I'm scared of layering and stuff, this is a high chance that we are, number one, probably not so familiar with our brushwork, or number two, afraid that we're going to mess it up because of our paint and water abilities. So that's where the gap is. And I speak to this in a YouTube video that I did where if you look for it, it's in my channel. It's called, I think, I skipped steps and it shows. And I was talking about how I had bought an expensive squirrel brush, thinking like, oh, that's going to give me this beautiful flowy effects, which, well, it did. But I think the difficulty that I faced with that was that I had no idea how to control the amount of water on my brush. So as a result, the effects that I got were had a lot of blooms. There were a lot of blobs that I didn't want. And this is where it became really, really tricky. So now I'm actually adding in some layers to this flower. And because it was yellow before, I'm just adding in a bit of yellow and I'm just changing things up a little. I've just added in a tad of orange as well. I'm using it in a very light consistency. So it's still a light color value. It doesn't mean that it's a light color value means you add in a lot of water and you let that a lot of water stay on your brush. But instead, you got to learn how to manage how we're going to retain the amount of light color while still having um, a non-saturated or soaking wet brush. Because I think sometimes when we think like, oh, it's going to be a light layer, we often think like, oh, we're going to have to use a lot of water. And when you use a lot of water, there's just this high chance that you are going to make a lot of the parts of the painting very, very wet. So I just want you to be mindful of that. Okay. So noticing how I'm just focusing on the center first, because I like to just really get people to zoom in on those centers. Okay. So I am just making flicking marks and strokes in a light value using the tip of my brush. I'm also making sure that I don't have too much water on my brush. And, you know, you can use back that same yellow that you were using before. And this is really going to help you to kind of capture some movement. My paper right now is fully dry. So that's another question you got to ask yourself about um, whether your paper is dry or is it still wet. Okay, so we're just going to keep this very minimal. Next, I'm going to move on to my beloved hellebore, which we hung out with earlier. And I'm just going to add in a couple of strokes. So I want to just do some negative painting here just to showcase this petal. And I think this was one of those questions that a lot of our brush movement members asked before about how to separate petals, which I talked about in day one of our retreat. I shared our Q&A library and how we have grouped it according to different topics. Really, I think for me, that is like the gold mine, um, because that's just my favorite part of the entire space. Breaking down all our Zoom replays into bite-sized topics, so it's just easier for you to go back into. I mean, nobody's going to watch a full Zoom session, right? And this is going to be the same thing for our paint and petal retreat. I'm going to break it down so that it's easier for you to just go back and do the parts that you felt like you needed more attention with. So I'm just adding in a bit of yellow now into the centers. But one of the things that I regretted doing is that you see I had added in too much pink in the center and I didn't leave that white space. So then I'm mindful of that because next time maybe I would think about it a bit more. But that said, I still love the entire floral shape. And then I'm gonna go in here and I'm just gonna do the same, noticing how I'm just using very gentle marks. And again, this is all marks that we're making with the tip of your brush and just be adding it to the center. Now, the center is always the space where I feel you give the most attention because it's the darkest point, and it's also the point that is going to be really um, giving your entire flower the most amount of body. So don't be afraid to always go back, add in darker greens, add in more marks. So I'm doing that, adding in more darker greens to the center of my poppy, which I had already, added in dark centers, and then I'm gonna do the same for here in this poppy here. Okay. And while we're adding greens to the center of our poppies, let's do that for this one too. And notice that it dried out so much lighter than it was before. And this is something that we need to know about watercolor, that it always dries lighter because your water is evaporating and then, there is just a lot less color left. And if you do wet in wet, that's even more, where it would just, almost disappear on you. So our flowers are slowly taking shape. And this is where, when we add too much layers everywhere, what's going to happen is that you are going to make it really overwhelming for the viewer because they've got so much to look at. So we want to make sure that there are some areas that have more layers than others, and then we downplay the layers on some. So in this case, my yellow flower here, very beautiful, and I love the layers. So because this white one is so far away, I'm just not going to add so much layers, but I'm just going to add in some thin, very thin kind of marks and all curved in the same direction. So then it showcases the side that we want to reflect. And if you think that your flower is very flat there, I invite you to re-wet that area if you like. Parts of it that you want to re-wet with clean water. And then you can always go in and inject in color. Like now, I've injected in some blue just to add in a bit more fun to the color, to the flower. Okay? And go crazy. I mean, while you're adding in blue, why not add a bit of pink? right? I mean, you don't know what combinations are going to come out from it, but I think it's fun. So now I've got a little bit of pink glow coming out here from the center of my poppy, as you can see. Okay. And since we're working on the poppies, let's give the center stamens a little bit more of a glow up. So I've added in some orange. In this case, over here, I was a bit more conservative. And the conservative also comes from the fact that it's my first flower that I'm gonna layer. Oh my gosh, there's always those nerves. Definitely nerves. And that's normal. It's okay. Don't forget that you can use dry brush marks too. Those are absolutely wonderful to add. And dry brush marks for your second layer is so fun because you are showcasing texture while giving your painting life. So I mentioned it in the Facebook group for some of the participants who were sharing their art. So I encourage you to share your art so that I can check it out. And I'm going to be hanging out in the Facebook group the entire week because the videos are going to stay for you all the way until Saturday next week. So you definitely have time to kind of look in on things. And I just wet these two areas here, and I've wet it because I want to give some softness to that part, just to, you know, make it a little, give it some blend there. So you can re-wet areas and give it life again, right? Because watercolor is only going to move where it's still wet. So you want to remember that. And I'm going to go into my pansies and I'm just going to really solidify that petal at the back. The only way is for me to basically glaze over color and add in that petal at the back. And I can do the same thing for here as well if I wanted to. Notice how I'm just really carefully just drawing it out and then painting it on. And I really love the bleed that is happening between these two petals. Next, I'm just gonna play with the centers a little bit using flicking motions of my wrists and kind of bring it into different directions. And since this is fully dry, why not add a little bit of this yellow in here just to create that bridge of color. So I've just added in a bit of yellow here. And when you do that, your colors mix on the paper because watercolor is transparent, right? So now I've added in that yellow. I can add in that same yellow. And what we're doing is we're glazing. So we did this in the art of color. And this is really a stage 3 skill. So if you're stage 1, congratulations, friends. You just learned a trick that our stage 3 artists are doing. So we glaze over here. And one of the things I like about not only adding in that yellow here is that you bridge the colors together and also you allow the area here to have a little bit of glow, which I really like. Okay, of course you can add in a yellow here, but here is where our stage 3 and 4 artists would know that when I add yellow to purple, I'm gonna mute the color. So this is a great way. I just added in a glaze of yellow, and it's okay to mute down parts of your painting because when you mute down parts of your painting, what happens is that other parts will stand out more. So don't be afraid of muddy colors. A lot of people are like, oh, please don't get muddy colors. No, it's okay. I learned that muddy colors are almost a bit of your best friend. Um, and it's good to have. So I'm injecting in some oranges now into the center of my pansy here. Then I'm also going to inject in a little bit of blue because it's the center, right? So we really want it to stand out a little bit more. And while I have blue on my brush, why not glaze over this leaf also? and kind of do it a little bit negative painting style. So let's take a look at what we have so far. How are we doing, friends? So Julie says, can you tell us the difference between glazing and layering? So glazing is a form of layering. The only difference is that glazing is with a very thin layer of color, and it allows the transparency of watercolor to go on it. So I'm just going to do a short demonstration of what glazing looks like. So you see, these are all already dry. We've got our dried strokes that we've done before. And say, for example, I want to add I don't know, say I'm going to add let me just think. Okay, I'm just going to add a red. I don't know why I picked red, but just felt like it was calling to me. So I'm going to add a red. And when I add my red here, okay, and it's in a very thin consistency, see, it's not thick, it's in a thin consistency. I could go even thinner if I wanted to and just be painting very, very light. But if I move over to where the leaf is, it changes the color. So you can see it kind of mixes, but now I've done it so thin, you actually don't see the difference. So let me grab a bit more red. And right now, you can see that basically we have got um, a different color coming out, and you don't get a faux red. Instead, what you get is red with some blue underneath. And what you're doing is you're really mixing the color. You can see the difference between this here and this here. And that's because there is a tinge of red underneath. So when you're glazing, you're actually using a very thin layer of color over that same area. And you can do it where it is exactly at that spot. And glazing is really, really good when you want to, say, brighten up some of your greens. Say, for example, you picked a green that you felt was like too blue or too gray or something. And then you can always brighten it up with a little bit of yellow. So you can pick up yellow from your palette and then you can glaze over parts of the stems, like what I'm doing now. And by doing so, you kind of change up the color of the stems. So you can see I just glazed over yellow. And the difference, I just used pure yellow. So I did not use a green yellow paint. And what you're allowing yourself to do is you are allowing yourself to change up the color of your greens because they make some paper, and also because watercolor is transparent. So you're going to get the transparency of the color underneath showing through. I hope that helps you to answer the question, Julie. Great question. I love questions like these. And, I can tell from the questions that you are asking, you're at least a stage 3 artist as well, because you're thinking about these things. And that reflection process is so important. So, while it's still wet, I'm just going to charge in some orange into my stems. Why not, right? Um, because it's fun. So do the fun thing, friends, and explore because you can see I charged in some orange in there into my stems, right? Keep the fun going. So now we are still adding layers to our painting, and we are going to be adding leaves pretty soon. But one of the things that my brush movement members are always telling me is that they struggle with the leaves. They're like, oh my gosh, Jillian, where do I add those leaves? I always feel like you got to decide, friends. You got to decide if your painting is, you're wearing a beautiful dress, then you're going to let your beautiful dress shine. Then your accessories are kind of secondary, right? So ask yourself right now, if we're going to add a lot of leaves, it's going to be a flower bush. Is that the look that you want? If it isn't, then we scale back on the leaves. Instead, you can just change things up and create like what I like to do, which are broken leaves here and there. And I'm going to also create more buds. So here, maybe I want to add in a bud. And notice how I'm just adding in just at the side. Just a little bit of negative painting there. Okay. Um, and while it is still wet, charging in a little bit of color, and I'm just going to be adding in a little bit of layers to some of my leaves as well. You know, glazing if you would like over some areas. Adding in a couple more leaves. How are we doing, friends? Hope you guys are doing good so far and you are, really focusing on what you can do instead of what um you're seeing Jillian do. Because like I said, I remind you, I'm a stage 4 artist, right? And there's always going to be this comparison because of course we hope to paint as well as, but I also want to invite you to see and ask yourself what you can do at this stage and then visit like specific skill builders that could help you, right? So we're going to paint in a couple of leaves now. Noticing how with some of these leaves, while they're still wet, I love, love, love to injecting color. Love to just like, disrupt the flow a little. I don't know, like I said, add orange to your leaves. I mean, why not? Let it mix on the paper. Okay, look at this gorgeous thing happening. And then, there's also this thing about like how we should paint light and then it slowly, progressively gets darker and darker and darker. But I like to, again, challenge that. And you can always paint light colors. You see, I just did a leaf here. And this leaf here looks like it's behind, but there is a stem going on here. But you see, because our um, our stem here has fully dried, it just looks like I have a leaf behind it now, right? So make sure that it's fully dry before you attempt that so that it would make sense. Then you can add in a couple of leaves that are, bluish. This is actually a fully blue leaf. Um, and I did that because our purple is closer to the blue. So then this is really the color theory and how they are sitting with each other on the wheel. So we're thinking about relationships as well. So that's something that a stage 4 artist would start thinking about. Let's try injecting in some orange in there again. Let's go around and see where we want to kind of add some leaves. And notice that the leaves, I'm not dressing them up too much. I'm just focusing on allowing them to be. See, I just created this crooked line that went all the way here. Don't make your lines straight. Make them crooked and slanty and strange and awkward. The more you have that, the better your painting is going to look. That's why I love the messy marks. The messy marks are so good. Now this part really bothers me because it's so flat, and I am just going to put down just water, and we are going to do some wet and wet. So you can actually see that my page at the moment is wet, and I am just going to be adding in some water for a wet and wet. I have just put down my brush just for 2 seconds because I am just checking on my camera just in case you're wondering like if the video has paused. So while it's still wet, I'm just gonna be charging in just a little bit of color here just to brighten it up a bit. There. So the blue that I was using before is it's in between a phthalo blue, um in between a phthalo blue and a bit of ultramarine. Okay, for this blue that is here in this blue leaf, if you were asking about that one. So I can go in and kind of exaggerate the blue a little bit more. So you can see the whole variation of all the different leaf colors and shapes. Um, and while all of this looks like a lot of color, you can also see the harmony in it, right? And just to exaggerate this empty leaf a little bit more, I am going to use my favorite cobalt green with an injection of yellow and kind of do some negative painting here just to make sure that you can see that there is a leaf there. I'm going to place over this one. How are we doing, friends? At this stage is also a critical stage. There's a very high likelihood that we are thinking about overworking. I am, noticing how I'm going around spreading out that same color around in different parts of the painting. It's all done intentionally. So I'm going to finish up the painting now. And finishing up the painting for me is always adding in that last dark 5%. And this kind of brings everything out a little. Okay, so you notice that I'm focusing on the centers and noticing that my poppies are I've not spent enough time on them, but now I am back looking at them. So just adding in a bit more of that center color so it kind of stands out a little bit more. And we're going to call brush down very soon, friends. So I hope that you've managed to see how the different stages kind of build out on each other, how they're all reflected in this entire composition. And um these were all of the paint the flowers that we did here. And we essentially translated whatever that we have done individually and put them into a composition. So take some time to breathe and you know, share in the chat how this experience has been for you. I want to show you this guy here, which was also based off the flowers here. Okay. So I'm sorry, my cups and everything. I'm so afraid of knocking them over. But here we are. So these flowers were what we did in the retreat. And then we've got these flowers here. The same flowers, the poppy and everything. And this one had the tulip in it. And this one here was a stage 3 painting that I did with brush movement. In fact, we call this Paint and Petal Retreat, but this is actually part of a floral class that we call Paint Your Own Bouquet. And Paint Your Own Bouquet, this is season 1. This is season 1. Because this month we did season 2. So every month we take last year's class and do a spin on season 2. So this was season 2. And stage 1 we did this. And then we took the same flowers and we put it in a composition. But like one of the things that because the art of composition has arrived, I started to talk about like layouts and arrangements and also color, which is a very important factor when we're building our bouquet. Okay, so these flowers here are essentially the same flowers that you see here. And this is stage 1, this is stage 2 and 3. And I pegged it at 2 and 3 because of the fact of the use of layers, negative painting, floral perspective in different directions. And then after this one, we do this one here. This is stage 3 and 4. Again, the same flowers, and this time we've got the daffodils. So fun. And notice how I did not put the daffodils in this one because I feel like the daffodils are going to kind of push the stage 2 over because of the paint and water ratio thing. Where you've got yellows and then when you've got reds and like there's a chance of everything overpowering each other. And you can see how our stage 3 and 4 will develop. And then here is our stage 4 and 5. Because the stage 4 and 5 artist basically does not need to make it look like the floral shapes anymore. But stage 4 and 5 artists are focused very much on learning to lean into what is happening on the paper, basically turning the blobs into blooms, right? If you think about it. And I wanted to share an old painting that I did. And this is where like repetition becomes such an important thing. I painted this painting in 2022. So I did all of my work and I highly encourage you to do that. So in 2022, at this stage, I was kind of like stage 2, 3, or I don't know, maybe 3 somewhere. And I was so into the white flowers. I had no idea how to do the negative painting yet. And I was just, thinking to myself, like, how am I going to have the greens, but I still want to have the white flowers. So I didn't know how to do that. And then I did this also in 2022. I still have it framed. And I loved it so much because it was the first time that I just wet the entire paper. And then I just dabbing in greens. And then I was just like, okay, wherever the white spaces are will be the flowers. And then I tried it out again, but then it turned out like this. So I actually painted this one first and I was trying to replicate it, but I just couldn't do it. And I was so frustrated because I was like, what is going on? Why is this not working out? Um, and then months, well, not months, years later after this, I was like, I'm gonna challenge myself. I gotta do it again. And I was just wondering to myself, right? Like, am I ready to get the white flowers out? What stage was I at then? And as I said, here I was at stage 3. And I was just learning to paint from reference. This was done this year, where now my understanding of watercolor has changed, my ability to create a composition, negative painting and everything. So this is where really I feel like the stages is a good way for us as artists to stay in, focusing on that skill and building that left brain thing where our left brain really wants the structure and the clarity and the direction. And then our right brain wants to play, right? And it wants to just, and it's really connecting both sides of the brain together. And when you get to stage five, or four, this is where like you already know how watercolor works. And you are just playing with timing. You are really playing with, you've already done all the work around color and all of that. So I feel like I hope that this has been insightful for you to see and also hopefully help you to not rush, that you are supposed to be where you are, and all of us are going to have different stages, and it's exactly why I really wish that I had this space, this watercolor space. um I want to show you how stage four looked like for paint your own bouquet. So these were the same flowers, right? And this was stage four, and you can see it's very wet. There is the marigold, the pansy, and they're all hints of things. The poppies, the crocus, and they are not like exactly flower shapes, but they are hints of it, and you can see the same commonality. It's all using marks, and it's using the marks and kind of like putting them together, and then kind of like understanding how paint and water interact on the paper. So it's almost like a tennis game where you are knowing, like, okay, when am I going to serve the ball? When is a good time for me to drop in the paint now? Or when is the right time for me to let go and stop, right? So I am hoping that this gives you as much insight as you can so that you are ready for your assignment. I am so excited for the assignment. So now that we have created something like this, you know, for our assignment, there are a few things that you can do. I invite you to create another version of this, pick your flowers that you want and create it and share it in the Facebook group. I'm going to be hanging out all week. I think this is going to be the most fun because this is where you allow yourself to have the permission to just do what your stage is able to do. And there's going to be so much less comparison. Yes, you're going to get lost. Yes, if you're stage one, you're like, oh my God, where do I place the things and stuff? You don't have to know. All you need to do is use the brush, make the marks, and then kind of tweak things like in terms of distance and space or size, right? And then add in the thin lines, like what we have done. And remember that your lines don't have to be straight. They can be curved, and you can add in imaginary fillers as well, right? So seeing how like this one, like I just added in like, I don't know, red dots. What? Just add in red dots and marks. Why not? Right? And injecting in orange into my leaves. I just love seeing the orange burst into my leaves here and in these spaces. Okay, so have fun with the process. And I would love to see your different compositions. But the composition part is where I invite the stage 3 to 5 artists to do. Now, if you're stage one and two, I invite you to do your little fillers in your composition. If you have painted it individually, then you can either consider adding in, small little fillers around and make it into a tiny little bouquet, like a boutonniere for a wedding. And this way you are also practicing refining some of your thin strokes, which, as I mentioned, is a very important one because this is going to be the way in which you get your muscle memory right to learn for layers later on. Okay, so this is your assignment, friends. You will see the full details of it um, inside of our artist passage portal. So you're going to see day 6 appear. Day 6 is where I would add in assignment and I'll talk to you about it. I'll talk you through it and I'll share some ways that you can think about expanding and growing beyond and do that assignment because then you can share it over day 6 and day 7. And of course, if you are interested, I would love to see you on our Tuesday live class, where our brush movement members will also be hanging out. And then following which, I would love to invite you to Brush Movement Collective on Wednesday, where we are going to be opening doors for enrollment and basically the experience, the stages. I've shared so much and I feel like there is no space on Watercolor Land, anything like this. So don't compare me to a Patreon at all. Because I think that it's so different as to what they offer, and I feel so strongly about guiding artists in a pathway and helping them through all of this. Now Preet has a question about asking, could you please explain how to add white unpainted leaves and petals? So I love that question. And this is where we've got these, right? The overexposed um, whites here. And let me find it. Oh, where's my finger? The whites here, right? Similar to these here, where is this what you're asking? The white pockets, right, that I have. It's the same with the leaves. this is where this is where like the warm-ups and the practice with how you use your brush really, really comes in handy. Whoops. Um, and you need to be not afraid of using your brush to flick it if you need to, and kind of allow the watercolor texture to do the work for you. Sometimes you can, so I press, and then even before the mark is fully done, you see this is a fully done mark. Yes, when I drag it and I pull it up, right? But even before the mark is fully done, I basically press and I lift. And if I'm not happy with that, I can use the thin part of my brush to add in some of those marks just to mimic as though I have basically captured parts of it. So one of the things that I find when I'm painting that I really love, which is, leaving out the white spaces and things like that, where I have overexposed areas, is also the use of negative painting, where you are painting around the subject. Um, and if you love this style, you will love From Blobs to Blooms 2.0. I had a couple of artists who were around stage 3 and 4 and they were just like, oh, Jillian, how do you paint these guys and these guys? And it was also a time where I was just exploring in my sketchbook these kinds of paintings. Let me see. Very wet paintings. Let me find my wet paintings. Oh my gosh. These are mostly my dry paintings. There, it's another one where you talked about like the white spaces, right? So for me, you can see this here is clearly negative painting because I've added in the leaves on top with the whites, okay? And then sometimes it's just leaving broken strokes and broken marks. So lifting your brush prematurely will allow you to get these marks. Another way is also using a smaller thin brush to capture some of those marks. Now, the entire time today, I've been painting with the large brush. I did not change to my smaller brush, and I can do that. But one of the things that I did not want to do was my fear was that if I were to leave out if I were to change to my thin brush, then our stage one artist will be like, okay, wait, when do we change and when do we do this? And so I wanted to just keep it simple and just use one brush. But you can change over to your smaller brush when you are doing details, when you are doing your thin lines, when you are adding in parts inside the middle of the flowers. For example, when you want really nice small thin details, like these small details are all done with a small brush. And Juliana asked, do I plan ahead where the white pockets will be? Yes and no. Sometimes I let the flowers appear because I'm like, oh, why not? add a cloud here, my M stroke, and a dot. Doesn't this look like a flower now? Which is why I said it's so good for us to use to allow the marks to show the flowers instead of trying to make the flowers. And this is also based on me liking to paint in a more abstract style. This one here is just everything done in one layer. This was actually a live session that I did with Aurelia on Instagram in the beginning of this year. And everything is done in one layer. So I wanted to just play with color. And that's why I said, injecting in orange into your leaves is just like genius, right? Where we injected in orange over here. Oh dear, you can't see. Yeah, where we injected in orange here and here, these are fun. And, just playing around with injecting in color, taking a look at here, I'm like, oh, a white space. Why don't I do some negative painting and add a dot in the middle? And then you create a white flower there accidentally. Um, and somebody just asked, okay, these are the wet paintings that I was talking about. So our members were like curious about how I created these and these. And these are all um, this was why I basically gave birth to the From Blobs to Blooms 2.0 to talk about this, the use of water and how we don't have to use water just for our first layer, but for multiple layers. And everything is about timing, it's about knowing how to read the paper. And it's no longer about knowing just how much paint and water in your brush, but it's like reading the timing of your paper. And at stage 3 and 4 and 5, by now you should be able to do the brushwork and you understand how to control and how much water to add, how to load your paper. So all of that is out of the way. And that's why this here is more of a stage 3 to 5 kind of scale. Um, Creed said, so Juliana said, do you plan the white pocket? So I answered that. I said yes and no. And here is where I like to use my composition rules, which I talk about in the art of composition, where I showcase different ways in which I am painting. So let me just give you a little tour of that. Um, so that it would make a little better sense. So here is where we are. Okay, these were the references. And let me just see here. This is where our portal is. And, if we go into our skill builders, this is where under 60 days of color and composition, you will learn about really at the moment, our composition, we have got the art of composition building out. This is a 2025 workshop. And our brush movement members get all of this for free because right now this is not available yet. I'm waiting for it to be fully built out before I release it for people to buy the program. But they're getting it for free. And we started with a live overview. And then following which we've got two different things. We've got this one, which speaks to the different armatures. So these are layouts, which is where the planning comes in. So someone asked in the chat about planning. Let's see. Do I plan and see the composition in my head? Yes, I do. So you got to start thinking first about which armature you are selecting in your composition. And I'm going to be talking about that tomorrow during our live session. And then after you speak to the different armatures, so all of these, like say for example, I click the triangular layout, right? And here, what you would see is I will be sharing with you about how we actually plan the thumbnails and then how we put it to practice and paint it out. So that way you actually are able to visualize what is going on. So you can see our portal is kind of mimicking, it's being hosted by the same place that we do the our retreat. So if you're familiar with the way that space works, it's the same space. And I love it because we just migrated here this year because I just realized that, oh my gosh, we have so many videos, but I wanted to make it as clean as possible for members so that they can find everything. And then here was just released just last month where we talk about the hierarchy of watercolor, how to create interest using shade, using edges, saturation, layers. So there's so much in terms of the composition yet. And this is not done because this is just the second chapter, and I'm going to be building out more from June. So then that way, you will really get to see also a little bit more. And as I mentioned, this is from Blobs to Blooms 2.0. So this is in the next skill builder. So I find that when you know exactly how watercolor works, so these skill builders all focus on how watercolor works. If you know how watercolor works and it's like at the tip of your fingers, you will then be the chef because you know how the flavors taste and you know how they go together, right? And then from that, it's going to be so much easier. Like, we're going to be talking about color tomorrow also during our live session. So that's another huge thing because I feel like so many people for composition, they focus a lot on just layouts and planning the space, but color plays an even bigger role in this. And initially, I wanted to build out this program for just beginners and make it really basic. But now each module is basically for each stage. Um, so yes, so that's where we are at. I mean, there's so much really to explore, but it's important for us to just focus on like that one thing. So we've got a member, Rochelle, she's like focusing on just armatures all month, and she has been like, I don't know if you've seen her on our Facebook, but she has taken our flowers that we have done for Paint and Petal, and she has been putting them in the specific armatures, which are the specific layouts. She's been doing diagonal, she's been doing triangular, and different things like that. And then here is the art of color. So it's no longer just about the color wheel, but how does it work in its relationship? The painting families, the properties, how are we going to mix the use of complementaries and then applying them, color bridging, using temperature, looking at your old art and seeing how to improve their color. So yes, so this is where all of those things that I've been sharing as you're watching me paint, and this is what our brush movement members get. And every workshop that I provide, they continue to get for free as long as they stay a member. And every month you get the classes like what you saw, the different stages. So we are going to be opening doors to this amazing space on Wednesday, and I'm really excited because I don't usually keep the doors open. I have a limited time for enrollment because I really want to focus on the members inside because I provide a lot of personalized feedback, and I also make sure that, I do a lot of voice memos. I'm actually kind of annoyed that I can't do voice memos on Facebook when I'm looking at the Facebook things because sometimes I want to say so many things, but then I'm like, oh my gosh, I have to type it out. I'm so lazy. I don't want to use my fingers. I just want to talk. So that's where we are at, friends. Thank you so much for joining me. This replay will be available for you. And I really hope that you enjoyed the pace this time because it's 5 days. It's a little bit more time for you to kind of play and explore. Once again, this session was 2 hours long. Oh my gosh, I don't even know if it's a time management thing or I cannot decide, but I am so happy you guys are here with me, all 28 of you that are still staying here. Thank you so much. Let's end off with sharing in the chat one thing um that you have um learned, or if you're still processing that, I just want you to tell me what feeling you're feeling right now. Just put it in the chat, like what are some of the feelings that you're feeling. Also, if you have painted along with me, don't forget to post it in the Facebook group. So Terry said, so hopeful. Oh, that's such a good word. Hopeful. I'm so glad. Um, so yes, join me on Tuesday if you are up for it. We're gonna go deep into composition, definitely. And I'm going to change the view to gallery so that I can see all you beautiful people here. And I also want to take a look at your art. Now it's time for me to see what have you guys been doing so far. Tell me, show me, share with me. Are you making orange leaves too? Oh, Tanya, I love it. Oh my gosh, you added a background and softened it out. Oh my gosh, amazing. Juliana, I love the movement of your stems. Eileen, oh, your brushstrokes have improved so much. I mean, from the time I've seen you in other retreats, so I recognize so many of your names here. And Hillary, of course, I absolutely love the delicate nature of your layers. So amazing. Rachel, you're gonna show me something. Oh, the orange colors. Oh my gosh, I love the orange that you have chosen. Actually, I don't have an orange, but yeah, that orange in my leaves. But yeah, I love it. I love the boldness of the colors. Hala, I'm seeing you here. Oh my gosh, so beautiful. I just love how light the colors you have chosen. Krista, so amazing. Oh, I like the layers. You're very good with the bold brush strokes there. Thank you so much, friends, for hanging out with me. This was super fun. And yes, enjoy the replay. And you will be catching me if you have got any questions at all about anything, whether it is about your painting as you are doing it because you've got questions naturally. That's the thing. I love questions because it means that you've been painting and you need to paint and not just watch. Please let me know. I will be happy to answer them either on Facebook or if you drop me an email. I'm actually slowly going through my emails because I dropped an email asking you guys how things have been, and I had lots of replies, and I'm like slowly replying to each one of you. So it's coming if you're waiting for my reply. Um, and thank you so much for also sharing your time with me. I'm going to say good night, good morning, good noon, wherever you are at. And yes, thank you so much. This was such a wonderful time spent. And I hope that this has been helpful for you so it changes the way you start to see color and painting and that, you don't focus on just the right brain, but really the left brain and like kind of marry them together. Thank you, friends. So bye-bye.